Fighting back against the people who maintain the system. This is the CORAPRO broadcast with Jay Outlaw.
Welcome to the CORAPRO show, folks. For those of you who don't know and understand what CORAPRO is, first of all, it's spelled C-O-R-A-P-R-O. That's right, C-O-R-A-P-R-O, CORAPRO. And just to give you a quick little background on the name CORAPRO and why this or that is the name of this program, it is because this broadcast is designed to counter certain behaviors, counter certain activities, basically to counter a system. And that system is the system of racism, white supremacy, racism, which is white supremacy. Back in, I believe that the program started maybe a little earlier than what most people know. But going back to the 60s, certainly back to the 50s, and I would say that it probably even reaches back to the 20s and 30s, but I would say the program existed as far back as J. Edgar Hoover becoming the director of the FBI. But J. Edgar Hoover instituted a program that he called COINTELPRO, which stood for Counterintelligence Program, and this was the program that was used in order to hinder advancements by the black race in America. And the thought process here is this: if there was a program that was instituted, implemented, and maintained in order to thwart the progress of black people in America, that was designed to neutralize, it was designed to disrupt and destroy any progress, and even particularly to prevent the rise of a so-called black messiah, then I submit that there must be a program to counter the counterintelligence program. And the counterintelligence program was based on racism. That being said, there must be an effort to counter racism. Thus, CORAPRO, Counter Racist Program. Now, I will say that anyone who is offended by counter racist measures being taken by anyone, but particularly black people, I would submit that these must be people who are dedicated to maintaining the system of racism, white supremacy. That being said, CORAPRO, Counter Racist Program, has a need to exist, to grow, and to develop, and that's what this program is all about. I'm your host, Jay Outlaw. Thank you for tuning in, and I would just ask that you would like this broadcast and that you would share it on your Facebook, on your YouTube, on your Twitter, or whatever social media that you are using, that you would share it so that the word can get out, because this is going to be a think tank type of program, and it's all about constructive information that can be used to counter racist behavior and culture. So again, that being said, my name is Jay Outlaw, and let's get this thing cracking. So one of the things that I want to tackle on this first broadcast, and I don't know necessarily how long we're going to go. I'm trying to break away from such a regimented way of broadcasting, because I come from a radio broadcast background. But the world is changing, and people don't listen the way don't listen from a traditional listening behavior pattern or what have you. Now, we live in a 140 character Twitter world, and everybody wants everything fast, get to the point. I get it, because I'm sort of that way myself. We're being conditioned by our environment, so I get it. So I want to try to get right to it. One of the things that I want to talk about, though, is I had been thinking about different words. And this shouts out to my man Gus T. Renegade with the cows. The cows is the context of white supremacy. Great broadcast, and very constructive. But Gus always talks about the significance of words and making sure that our words are accurate. And I am convinced that many of the words that are used in today's society are designed to confuse the victims of racism about what racism is, how it works, well, what it is and how it works. I'm convinced of that. So I was thinking about the so-called maldistribution of wealth. And that's one of those words, that's one of the I would say newer sociological words that are used to describe certain things in society. Like, we have so many words now, like, space. That's another word. And I hate that word, space. You hear people saying, well, we need to be able to have safe spaces, and we need to be able to share our space with others. And, and another word is intersectionality. That's another one of those words. It's not just about race, because if you are homosexual, and you're black, then you're dealing with not just racism, but also homophobia. And so those two intersectionalities, all of these words. And to me, all of this stuff is really designed to confuse the issue. Not to say that those things are not real, not to say that they're not real. But what I'm saying is the greatest problem on earth, as far as I'm concerned, is white supremacy. Everything else swings from the hinges of racism, white supremacy. So let's deal with this so-called maldistribution of wealth. And I'm probably going to unpack those other ideas later on or in another show, in another broadcast. But for right now, the whole idea of the maldistribution of wealth. And so I was thinking, as I was taking a stroll to the lagoon up on the lake a couple of days ago, and I thought about, why is it that black people in the U.S. and maybe even around the world, but I'm just particularly focused right now on the U.S., why is it that there is this so-called maldistribution of wealth? And I didn't like the word maldistribution of wealth or the phrase, because it sort of, when you use that phrase, it yields or renders this idea that there is this line that everyone gets in life, and someone is distributing wealth. And because you are black, you're getting less wealth in this line than someone else. That's why I don't like these little new sociological words that are thrown out, because they're very, oh my God, they're confusing. Not that I'm, because I totally understand what they mean when they use these words, but I mean confusing in the sense that it draws your attention away from what the real issue is and places it somewhere else. where the issue just really isn't what it's purported to be. Now, that's not what life is. We don't go and get in some line, like a bread line or cheese line, and have wealth distributed to us. Wealth is something that you are personally responsible for. And what has happened in the United States is Black people have been historically locked out of the opportunity to build their own wealth. You go back to the transatlantic slave trade. You go through chattel slavery. You go through, post-Reconstruction, Jim Crow, into the civil rights movement, through that into the period of mass incarceration. And that's where we are now. And Black people have historically been locked out of wealth building opportunity. Now, I like to sometimes use a parable that can draw or that can illustrate the point a little more clearly. Imagine if you are an Olympic racing team, track and field. You're running the 400, your team is running the 400 meter. Now, these teams are broken up according to race. So you have the Anglo-American team. You have the Spanish team. You have the African team. You have, just whatever. Now, I say race, but you can't get away from race without nationality. So the reality is, let's just say you have a white team, a Black team, an Asian team, and a Mexican team. How about that? Now, what if everyone, and this is obviously a 400 meter relay. So the first set of runners take off at the gun and they hand off the baton to the next runner. And that runner continues the race, hands off to the next runner, and finally getting to the anchor man and handing off and continuing. But just imagine if this race does not end. Imagine if the race continues to go around and round and round, and each lap represents a level of wealth, right? Now, everyone is handing off from runner to runner, handing the baton off all the way around till you complete a lap, and then the cycle continues. But Black people, every time they hand off to the next runner, the runner has to go back to the starting line and start over. Do you know how long it would take to complete one lap around? All the other runners may have 3 or 4 laps done by the time the Black team completes one lap. This essentially is what wealth building has been for Black people. Now, let me explain that a little deeper. Black people have been locked out historically of the opportunity to, first of all, work for themselves, going, 200 plus years back, 300 years back, if you will. But blocked and locked out of opportunity to work for themselves. In fact, we Black people were the opportunity for others, particularly whites in this country, to build wealth. But to stick with the analogy, these white people have historically been able to work, make progress, hand that progress down to the next generation, and let them run and expand that same progress and opportunity. And each runner represents a new generation. So you have something that was started by the first generation, built up as far as this generation could build it, and then handed off to the next generation. And that generation continues to build and expand and grow. And then they hand it off to the next generation. So each generation is starting with a level of progress that was handed down to them from the previous generation. Black people, on the other hand, have never had as a cultural understanding and practice to build in one generation, hand down to the next generation. Each generation of Black people are starting from the starting line every time. When my grandfather was born and came of age, he struck out on his own to start building. Now, my grandfather is a great example of a man who built in his lifetime. I know that at some point he worked for someone else, but in my lifetime, I never knew him to work for anyone. I had knew that my grandfather had at least 2 restaurants that I know of. He also had a construction company. Now, of course, when I say construction company, you can't think McHugh in Chicago or, one of these huge corporations, but he did little construction jobs around his town. Maybe little things, hauling a load of gravel and maybe digging out a huge hole or something like that, small construction projects. But he built. Now, the prudent thing to do would have been for him to be able to groom his next generation to hand those businesses down to his sons, grandsons, and for the legacy to continue. This is pretty much what the model is for other races of people. That didn't happen. And I don't necessarily know why that didn't happen. But then, so my mother starts from the starting line rather than starting from businesses that are already established, and she could thus expand them. And then I come along. And then I'm starting from scratch because my parents didn't build anything. They worked. And this is one of the fallacies of Black wealth, Black culture. We teach our children, go to school, get good grades so you can get a good job. And who are we going to get these good jobs? People who have built, expanded, passed down to the next generation. We see our role as go to school, do well in school, so that someone who has already been building will give you a job. We have very well-to-do Black people who have good paying jobs, but you cannot pass your job down to the next generation. And so while others, particularly white people, have learned the name of the game is to feed yourself by building in your lifetime, passing it down to your children so that they never have to go to anyone else. We have been starting from scratch every generation. You can never build wealth by starting over every generation. So there's no such thing as maldistribution of wealth. There is a severe misunderstanding as to how wealth is created and built. So the first thing I want to leave with you in this first transmission, this first broadcast of the CORAPRO, is that we have to change the way we view, number one, our life purpose, our ability to build, our ability to create, and our ability to pass down to the next generation so that they are not starting from scratch, but they are literally taking the baton and taking all of the progress that we made in our lifetime, and they understand the responsibility that they have to not only maintain the progress that they were handed, but to expand it and then do the same thing for their next generation. There is no, now don't get me wrong. We can talk about government and the levers of power who control aspects of wealth and wealth creation and access to opportunity. I'm not saying that you don't have those impediments put in place by those who are dedicated to practicing racism, which is white supremacy. But what I'm saying, the first way to counter this so-called maldistribution of wealth is for Black people to understand what our biggest problem is that we are not building in our lifetime and then passing that progress down to the next generation. I'm going to leave it there for now. This has been the very first CORAPRO broadcast. And I just want you to ponder that for a minute. Think about the analogy of a 400-meter relay that runs throughout history. And if you have to continue every time you're passing the baton to have that next generation to run back to the starting line, starting all over, you're never going to catch up. You're never even going to compete with everyone else. So what we must learn to do today is to understand you do not go to school to get a good education and get a good job so that you can ball out, so that you can take trips, so that you can drive the fancy car, live in the fancy home, eat in the fancy restaurants, and be part of the Black bourgeoisie. Black bourgeois are doing nothing to advance not just the people, not even to advance their family. But your goal should be for this first generation of builders. Yes, go to school, get a great education, go get a good job paying you as much money as you can possibly make, live on the bare minimum, and use your surplus to start building businesses. Build something simple that you can manage in your lifetime, expand it as much as you can, and then pass it off to the next generation. That should be the goal. As we teach the next generation the responsibility that they also have to become as educated as they possibly can, develop their minds, but to take this first generation enterprise and expand it through their generation and then pass it off to their next generation. Then we will start to build wealth. Then we can start taking control of our communities. Black people are getting shot down in the streets by race soldiers, suspected white supremacists who are posing as cops because black people don't control their communities. They don't control the economy of their community. They don't control the politics of their community. And when you don't control that, the politics of your community, the economy of your community, then those who do control it will come in as an occupying force and terrorize you. You're hated because in most cases you're black, but you're harmed because you have nothing. You're poor. But this is the generation that can stop it. This is counter-racist activity number one. Become a builder. Think like a builder. Live like a builder. Expand and pass. I'm Jay Outlaw. This is the CORAPRO broadcast counter-racist program. Broadcast number one in the books. Till next time, folks, keep your eye to the sky, your ear right here, and join us on the next CORAPRO broadcast. Peace.
Fighting back against the people who maintain the system. This is the CORAPRO broadcast with Jay Outlaw.